This is Guitar Business Radio, the podcast for the business of guitar. No reviews, no demos, no idle chatter, just useful dialogue and information to help you get the most out of your guitar-related business. Whether you're a guitar builder or a guitar player or just something in between, this is for you. Now, here's your host. Oh, wait, it's me, Jeffrey D. Brown. So let's get to it. Welcome to episode 4, and thanks for joining us on this journey into the business of guitar. And some good news, there seems to be more of you each week, and that's very gratifying. So if you like what we're doing and where we're going, I hope you'll tell your friends and support the show. Now, like any business, we need to deliver a product or service that the market wants. Very important. I can't stress that enough. And that means you have to get value from this show in whatever way you define it. That's in order for you to want to come back and listen again. That's repeat business. And for many businesses, that's their lifeblood. So in that light, it's incredibly important for us to be engaged with our market in every way we can so that we know what to deliver and if what we are delivering is of interest and value in one form or another. So we really have at least a couple of reasons to be engaged from the show's perspective. One, as I said, is to understand if what we're doing is working. And the second is to give a voice to our listeners, which is why we're spending a lot of time talking about and implementing a nice, really diverse array of opportunities by which you can participate and be part of this podcast. You know, I realize it's not for everyone, and it's likely only a small percentage of our listeners will engage with the show, but it follows that the more who do, the more who will. And so once again, at the risk of repeating myself, which by the way is an important part of marketing, I would encourage you to check out our website, guitarbusinessradio.com, and click on Participate. That's where you can see all the options, from creating your own recorded segment that we call Guitar Business Minutes, or suggesting a topic of coverage or an interview of interest, all the way to submitting your own unique company news and people news for our upcoming segments called, respectively, The Shorts and Spill the Beans, where we make business fun for everyone. You won't get that information in this way anywhere else. So I hope to hear from many of you. And as always, you can connect with us by email or telephone on our Guitar Business Radio hotline or on Facebook and Twitter at Guitar Business. Now, once again, it's time for this. Well, now it's time for Questionable Moments, the segment where we bring up relevant questions of interest to our listeners, bat them around a bit, and see just what kind of answers we can come up with. So in episode 3, we brought up the following question: where is the pedal industry heading? And again, we got quite an array of comments, but there were a few that stuck out, and they were from Facebook. Rob says, I don't know about the future of pedals. I only use 3. An old wah I got back in 1979, a DoD overdrive from 1981, and an Ernie Ball expression pedal from 2007. So I guess that sounds like it's working, okay. But then Paul responded with, back to the beginning, the reinvention of some of the first classic stomp boxes instead of overly complicated beasts that you have to take a class to learn how to program. And finally, Karen and Ed, I'm not sure which one, simply suggested higher prices, to which there was the following response. I would say the exact opposite. With the market as saturated as it is, the components are being manufactured by more companies and driving the prices down substantially. And as it turns out, that response was from none other than Dennis Mollan of Protone Pedals. Even more coincidental is that Dennis Mollan is our guest on the show today, and we'll be asking him to expound on these issues and a lot more, so stick around for that. Now for this week's question that we're going to put out there, that is going to be, where do custom guitar builders go from here? That should generate a few opinions, so let us know what you think on our website at guitarbusinessradio.com. We have a new section there that we've just opened up, which is called appropriately Questionable Moments. So just click on Questions on the menu, and you can select any of our current or previous questionable moments and tell us what you think in the comment area. So chime in. You can also weigh in on Facebook or Twitter at Guitar Business, where you will also find the same questions. Now for something completely different. Well, Dennis Mollan started Proton Pedals about 15 years ago, and in that time has carved a path in a segment of the pedal market that may have seemed obscure to many, but when you hear him explain it, it seems pretty mainstream. The reason is that Dennis is a pretty smart business guy. There are reasons he does what he does, and he'll talk about it in much more detail as he joins us today on Guitar Business Radio. So, Dennis, thanks for coming on the show with us today.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. I'm glad to be in on the ground floor of this exciting new podcast. Like I said, I'm excited. We've been talking about it for a week or so now, and man, I don't know that there's anything like this out there. I know that there are some other very niched podcasts, but nothing like this. So I'm really excited to be here.
Well, thanks. I'm appreciative too. And by the way, we're on the top floor of the Guitar PR building overlooking water. Of course, what that means is there's one floor.
I'm
and there's a pond
no
outside.
Exotic location to brag about.
Well, great. Well, I'm happy to have you here. We've talked before and known each other for a little while, so great to have you on the show. So let's get started. I always like to start off with one of my favorite subjects that I guess some of the listeners may get tired of after a while, but I never do. So that's what's important. And that's foundations. And so I want you to, if you could, tell us a little bit about how and why you got into this business, and then what it took to build the foundation that your business sits on now.
The how and why. The why is pretty easy. 15 years ago when I launched, I really wanted something to subsidize, or I wanted an additional income. I just had a baby girl, and I didn't want my wife to go back to work, quite frankly. So I said, well, let's see if we can, I'd work a day job and then start off something cool. And I just kind of grew it from there. I know it's kind of an oddball answer, but I built a little boost pedal and showed a couple of friends and sold a few of them, and recognized, there might be some legs here. Right about the time my wife was ready to go back to work after having our daughter, and I said, well, no, let's see if we can make a run at this. This was before the market was completely saturated. And we decided to do things aesthetically different than everybody else in the pedal world.
Well, that's for sure.
And realized it had some legs. And here we are, like I said, coming up on 15 years. And it's been a wild ride, to say the least. As for a foundation, I'm a firm believer that if price is your unique identifier that sets you apart from everybody else, you've already failed. So if you're familiar with what we do, everything that we do is very graphic intense. So our foundation is just taking something that's already out there, something that everybody knows, loves, for example, a tube screamer, we'll tweak it, make it our own, but then we'll slap some really offensive looking artwork on it and make that our unique selling proposition. So nobody's doing anything as graphically intense as we've ever done. And that's kind of our calling card, is that we were the first ones to really put a cohesive piece of artwork on a pedal, on every pedal. Back 15 years ago, people were hand painting boutique pedals, and every pedal looked different. Literally, if you bought this particular overdrive or this particular boost or this particular fuzz, they were sometimes hand painted, but every single one was different. And for me, I like to have a little bit of consistency in the brand. That kind of every pedal is different it's not sustainable. It's not scalable from a business perspective. So we kind of took that aesthetic of, well, let's throw some cool artwork on it, but let's make it repeatable, scalable, and make it really over the top.
So that
did it.
So let me ask you, then when you're talking about the graphics, I'm a believer in that, but I guess that you're telling me that was a differentiating factor, that was doing something for you on a different level than what you were producing internally with the product, than the performance and functionality of the product. Are those two different things that you're really trying to delineate there, or what?
Well, for us, obviously, I mean, the name says it all. It's Proton pedals. It's got to sound good, but it's kind of a given that it's going to sound good. And I know that sounds kind of pretentious and it probably sounds pretty arrogant of me, but I'm not going to put it out there if it doesn't sound good. But for me, I was really aiming towards, at the time, 15 years ago, a very underserved population of the guitar industry. And that was the hard rock, heavy metal, punk rock kids. Nobody was servicing that crowd. They were just getting bright pink, green, oddball colors from Boss and from Dodd and all these other guys, all the big manufacturers, but nothing geared and voiced and designed aesthetically specifically for that crowd.
Well, how much?
So while, yes, absolutely, the tone and the sound is the be all end all, the look and feel and aesthetics of it are, I mean, it's kind of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts type of a thing. Like It really went hand in hand in establishing the brand.
Well, let me ask you this, with respect to that, and it kind of gets into my next question, which is talking about the particular niche in the pedal industry that you're in. But before I kind of dive into that, I'm kind of curious, within that market that you were talking about, that you were going after, and you're talking about the aesthetics. So you got the aesthetics and you got the functionality part of it, the tone or the rest of it. So could you describe whether or not there's a percentage of people that you think were mostly influenced by the look of the thing as opposed to trying out sounding it, or what? That's a really good question. Being that we are in this very visual world, I think the internet is nothing but impulse buy aisles at your grocery store. You didn't go to the grocery store with the intention of picking up one of those tabloid magazines, but it's there and it's in front of you and it's got something that caught your eye. That's what the internet has done to everything. So I think there may be, I know without a doubt that we make people stop in their tracks and say, what is that? And then they'll listen to it. Yeah, it's dramatic. And when I talk about, to digress a bit, when I talk about at the end of the show, some of the methodology in business and try to add a couple of inspirational notes to go out on, I talk about this 3 C's business and this really simple process. And one of them, the first C, is capturing the attention. And I am a firm believer in what I call repulsion marketing. I am perfectly okay to repel the tire kickers. I am so not a generic looking brand that if you get my aesthetic, you get what I'm doing, you get me, you get my brand. Whereas, say, Boss, for example, they're just a vanilla, here's some text on a funky color box. I don't know. Maybe it'll work for what I want. I don't even know what it's going to sound like. When you look at something like mine with a literal photograph of a horse skull on it, you kind of know you're going to get something a little bit different. And if you're the guy that is cool with having a photograph of a horse's skull on the Dead Horse Overdrive, then you're my guy. And I've got you. And I've got you for a long time, because once you stop because you like the aesthetic, you're going to dig the sound too. So do you think that the aesthetic embeds some preconceived expectations that people are going to hear regardless of what it is? I mean, does it kind of plant that seed in them so that, like you said, this is my kind of product and therefore it's going to sound the way I want it to? Yeah, now we're getting into the black magic of marketing, aren't we? I'm afraid so. Yeah, I believe so. Just as I believe that people can tell the difference between what kind of wood and what fret gauge they're using and things like this, which at the end of the day, those of us that have been playing for a long time, electrified through pickups, through 10-foot cables. It's all nonsense. You can't hear it. The electronics are really what's coming out. It's really but
some people will swear that they can hear the difference between stainless steel frets or nickel this and that. Okay, that's fine. And I'm sure Stevie Ray Vaughan can tell what chipset was in his overdrive as well, but it's nonsense. But to, again, marketing black magic, yeah, absolutely. People are going to, they're going to make that visual affinity. And if it does even remotely close to what they need, they're going to like it that much more.
Yeah. Well, I think that you've hit it. You're making that work for you. And before we exit this question, we were going to talk a little bit about, I wanted to ask you about your niche. And I don't know if, you kind of described it a little bit early on, but can you tell us a little bit more about how you would, say, describe to somebody at random what market you're serving and what that demographic looks like?
Right now, my primary demographic is about 16 to 25, very young, progressive, very technical metal musicians. They know what they want because a lot of their heroes use our pedals. So I get a lot of visibility that way. But really, at the end of the day, my target demo, 16 to 25, very particular in their equipment. They've still got a lot of disposable cash because, they're living at home. As we know, millennials live at home these days until their mid-20s. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy to help them spend their expendable cash.
Now, along that lines, have you had any thoughts about, working toward any other parts of the market? Any other demographics, any other niches, or are you committed to pretty much sticking in this one?
I've made some attempts to break out of that niche. Well, actually, I made one attempt, and I did it somewhat abruptly. I had one of those, you ever just wake up and you're just kind of mad at the world and you want to change everything about everything that you do? We did that. And as a brand, that will kill you. So over the course of, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 weeks, we completely facelifted all of the pedals and gave it a very monochrome, still edgy, but just monochrome artwork. And it damn near shut our doors.
Was that about a year ago or so? And I think
yes,
I remember that.
You and I did some PR together and everything else. I was trying to rebrand everything,
That's right.
And man, the market just didn't want to hear about it.
Yeah, no, I remember that.
So I licked my wounds, and we're okay.
And you are. And you're still going strong after.
Yeah, we're doing just fine. We recently, Guitar Player Magazine put us in their 2017 Hall of Fame. So, I mean, awesome. We're doing something right. Awesome. We've got signature models with Reeves Gabrels from The Cure and David Bowie and Megadeth, and we're doing all kinds of cool stuff.
Well, I suspect that's going to continue. But let's shift a little bit. I like to move around the landscape a little bit. So, in our last episode 3, and every week we put out a question of the week in our segment called Questionable Moments, and it is questionable. It really is. And so the question for this week, and I know actually that you've already seen it because I saw a little post on our Facebook page, which, by the way, is at Guitar Business, a little plug for that. But the question is very simple, and it led up to this interview really well. Where is the pedal industry heading? And we also added in that, it's an overcrowded market, but does that matter? So I'm interested in your thoughts.
It is saturated, to say the least. I mean, I don't have a solid enough command of the English language to adequately describe how saturated this market has become. But yeah, it's pretty crowded. For me, we've been here for 15 years. So luckily we do have just that momentum of time behind us, which gave us, a large social media following, a large mailing list and things like this, and a lot of artists that we've worked with over the years. So The saturation, it doesn't really bother me too much. We're still doing our thing. It has caught on. Pretty much everybody now does full-faced artwork on their pedals. So, nothing quite as graphic as us still, but that's okay. As far as where it's headed, man, I don't know. It's secular, and it comes and goes. If you'd have asked this question 10 years ago, I'd have said it was all about the fuzz. If you ask it 5 years ago, it's all about overdrive. You ask it 2 years ago, it's all about making them smaller. My thing is, I don't really pay a whole lot of attention to that. Now, I know that there's going to be plenty of flamers on Facebook talking about, I should keep my eye on the market and things like this, but I tend to do what I like to do and do that well. And I know that I will have enough people that believe in what I'm doing, and it'll be just fine. So from a business perspective, I tend to just laser focus on what I'm doing and focus in on my core competencies rather than looking around and seeing who's copying whom and where my place in that market is. Sure. I'm just going to continue to do what we do and do it to the best of our abilities. And everything should play out pretty well.
Well, I would say if you love what you do and you're going to live a lot longer. I mean,
it's definitely helpful. I from time to time, obviously we've got a crew here that does 90% of the builds and things. I still do all the R&D and the design work and things like this. But lately I've been just getting down there in the production room and soldering with my guys, and it's kind of fun again. So
it brings you back to center.
I'm prototyping a few new things to release later this year, just because I'm having fun at it again.
Do you have any hints? Any hints for us at all?
Well, we definitely will be doing a new delay pedal. We're about to release a new fuzz box. Probably, heck, by the time this thing hits the airwaves, it may be on our website. So, just some things like that. And then I may do, I'm thinking about a flanger or just some other oddball things. Nothing that's going to change the world. I don't think of what I do as, I'll call a spade a spade. I don't do anything innovative. Innovators often die broke. It's the people that take those innovations and make them usable or make them better. So, for example, Apple didn't invent the smartphone. Apple didn't invent the mouse. Apple didn't invent any of the things that we've come to know and love about Apple. They didn't invent the tablet. Somebody else did. They came along and made them better and made them more usable.
Right. That's right.
So that's what I try to do in what we're doing. For example, again, the Tube Screamer, everybody knows what that sounds like. So we altered it a bit to fix what a lot of people hated, which is that funky mid hump in the middle there, and sells like hotcakes for us. So I'm not a mad scientist. I'll leave that up to some of the old school guys, Zachary and Jorge Trips and things like this. I like to take tried and true designs that have been around there that are just bread and butter, meat and potato stuff, and bring them up to a modern age using modern components and things like this. Run the tests through digital processing. I use a lot of digital amplifiers here in the shop because that's what is in studios these days. And I need to know that my pedals work well, sound good in front of those.
You said on Facebook, I saw a comment that you put on our page, something to do with, going to plugins. Is that something that, you're looking at, or?
We've been kicking around the idea of having some plug-in versions of our pedals created. We've had several companies prototype a few things, but man, there's just something to be said for putting an analog pedal, even in front of a digital world. Put an analog pedal in front of these new digital amplifier modelers. It still sounds better. So I have a hard time going the full digital plug-in route on those things because it still just isn't there from that perspective. But doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying, because quite frankly, that's what people want. They want that ease of use. They want that. They want to put something in their Pro Tools plug-in shelf or in their VST rack to warm up the signal. But for me, there's just some magic still in sending a really hot and lug signal into your converters.
Yeah.
So it's just not yet. I have a feeling in the next couple of years, but right now I just can't find the company that hits it for us.
Well, it's something I guess we'll watch. But let's once again, let's shift over to something else that I think there's a lot of talk about. And there is an awful lot of talk. Maybe some of it is gossip, and there's a lot of that. And that's surrounding Gibson these days. Mm-hmm. And in all fairness, other companies. But I've said, I don't believe for a minute that these iconic brands are going to go anywhere. Although one thing we know for sure, change is certain. So I think we'll see change. But I was thinking you might have something to say on this and might want to weigh in. Change is part of life. And in the 21st century, it moves fast. Gibson, you're right. It's never going to go away. It's going to change hands. It's going to change leadership. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Who knows? There was a leadership change that brought us the gentleman that we have today that, if you ask some people, drove it into the ground. And yeah, okay, maybe that's true. But from a business perspective, it looks like he drove it into the ground trying some new things. Now, maybe they got a little crazy buying, what was it, Philips that they bought? Mm-hmm. I think so.
Okay. Yeah, why? Stick to your core competencies. Your core competencies of Gibson is guitar, not everything else Philips makes.
Yeah, understood.
So, I think recently I saw that he released somebody released an interview with him where he's kind of listing off a few points where local guitar stores and even Guitar Center could do things so much better and probably even solve a lot of their own woes. Obviously Guitar Center is in the same trash heap. And I saw that a lot of people give him flack for that. But you know what? Every point was spot on. Bring those expensive guitars down. Let people hold them. Let people touch them and play them. What's the worst that's going to happen? You have to take a couple $100 off because it got dented. So what? You might sell it. Make it a little more comfortable. Yeah. Make it a little more inviting. Bring in people that know how to talk about a flippin' guitar and in a personable way. A lot of retailers miss the mark.
Well, I think that this year is going to be interesting. I think there'll be some interesting things unfolding in the business. And when we speak at this time next year, which we may very well do, we'll be talking about some things that probably look very different. But, let me once again traverse across the terrain here a little bit. I'm coming up with these great little metaphors. But look, this show is about business. Certainly one of our highest goals, and I state this in my intro, is to give listeners useful and hopefully valuable information they can use, in whatever guitar-related business or professional activities they're involved in. So I guess from you, and as we kind of come toward the end of the interview here, I'd like to know what are some of the key factors in moving towards success in this business could be pointed to, in your opinion?
I would say first and foremost, get everything in writing. But
there you go.
Above and beyond that, get a support system. For me, my wife has been fantastic. I couldn't do any of this stuff without her. Everything from paperwork to taking care of the kids. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but when it comes down to the nuts and bolts of executing and driving your business, to launch and grow a business, you've got to put your head down, but you got to put your head down and work really hard for about a decade. And then you can lift your head up and kind of look around and hope that you still have friends and family around. And if you do, they're keepers. But that's really what it comes down to, is be ready to put in a lot of work. Nothing is ever easy, and launching a business today is the easiest and hardest time. It's easiest from a technological standpoint. It's easiest to get a business online, but it is the hardest from a competition base, a saturated market, not just in pedals, but everything, guitars, picks, everything. I think on Instagram, I probably follow 22 different cable manufacturers. So it's a saturated market. And if it's something that you're looking to make a living out of, be prepared to put in every waking hour for about a decade. And again, laser focus, stick to the core competencies. And if you love what you're doing, that helps. But I'm not paying mortgage with love. There comes a point where you have to say, well, I love this, but it doesn't make payroll.
Yeah. Well, there's a balance.
Don't love this one so much, but I got to make payroll.
Yeah. So it's, I think you're right. You're going to try something like that, having a little bit of stability and a fallback if you need it, gives you a little freedom to pursue those things that otherwise, if you get into it and you're loving what you're doing, you're having fun, you're still struggling, and you're getting behind in payments, all of a sudden, that kind of stress is going to start to take over, and it's going to influence it. And then the whole thing is just not going to be fun. So, we've all been there.
Starting a company is a lot like starting a band. And that's something that I think a lot of us can relate to. And that, when you're in your teens and 20s and late 20s, you can still get by on, mac and cheese and sleeping in the back of the van as you go do a regional tour. But after 30, that doesn't work anymore. It hurts. These things literally just hurt, sleeping in the van and long road trips and things like this. It's the same thing. When you're 20, 25, almost 30, launching a business, eating macaroni and cheese, kind of crowdsourcing where you're going to sleep, you can get away with that because you're following your dream. But at some point, you do have to wake up, and you do have to realize, okay, there is something to be said for calling it a day when it's ready. And, if you've got something that will subsidize it. For me, when we launched, I was working for the Department of Defense. So it was okay. I worked there, did that for 7 years parallel with Proton. So,
well, that's a lot of people do that. Tons of people do that. A lot of the guys, many of the guys that I've known in the business for all these years have done exactly that. You might not have known it because that wasn't the public persona that they wanted to see. But
exactly. Yeah, most people didn't. I never talked about what I did because at the end of the day, nobody cares what I do for a living. So, but yeah, everybody does. It's the metaphor of launching a band and launching a brand. There are so many parallels. It's ridiculous, and the odds of success are almost as slim both ways.
Well, at least it rhymes. Well, Dennis,
bonus points for that.
Yeah, this has been a terrific chat. I'm really glad we had you on the show. We learned a lot of things about you and your business, and I think there's a lot of good information here that our listeners will find of interest. So I hope that you'll come back again, and we'll talk about some of the changes that happened since the last time we talked down the road.
Anytime. I'm available anytime for you, Jeffrey.
Okay, bud. Take care. We'll talk to you again. So in episode 3, I talked a little bit more about the 3 C's, which is the simple formula we use anytime we're dealing with anything even remotely having to do with marketing or sales. Remember, the 3 C's are simply capture the attention, convey the message, compel the action. And in episode 3, I talked specifically about the second component, convey the message. I offered some minimal but important foundational elements for this aspect, which are be direct, be brief, get to the point, and a fourth and critical factor, be relevant. Now, I know I didn't elaborate on any of these, to say the least, but that was deliberate. At this stage, I want these items to become what I refer to as checkoffs. And that's not anything to do with the Russian playwright or the guy from Star Trek, but you have to check the boxes of each of these things along the way. And in my opinion, the way to do that is to embed these simple terms into your everyday thinking so you are mindful of them when you work on any of this stuff. It's got to come as part of the regular process, or a habit if you like. So continuing on, I'm going to touch on the third C today, which is, of course, compelling the action. This is where the rubber hits the road, as they say. This is what you want, whether it's visiting your website, watching a video, making a purchase, signing up for something, or, I don't know, listening to a podcast. It's really endless. It can be almost anything, but you get the idea. In the second C, you want to instill a certain amount of information or knowledge that sets up the third C. Some people might call this the close. That's okay, but I think many align that with strictly making sales, and that would be too narrow for us. So in the second C, as I say, the message has to set up the third C. They all work together. That's one of the reasons that we have to keep this simple. It's a relationship. And have you noticed that relationships based on simple foundational principles often work better than those that we have to refer to when somebody asks us, well, it's complicated. I'm sure most of you know what I mean. The message has to be direct, brief, to the point, and relevant for it to be retained long enough for the third C to do its job. And how do we compel the action? You're going to love this or you're going to hate it. But for me, it's primarily one thing: benefits. Not features per se, although there are times when the mere existence of a feature is seen as a benefit, but I'll get to that another time. Essentially, my view is that the benefit has to be overwhelming. It has to overwhelm any objection that might arise at the moment, and that is usually the point of where the action is taken. Now, realistically, do we expect this to happen 100% of the time? Surely not. But all of this is designed to increase your chances, improve your odds, or just make it more likely that you will succeed with whatever marketing or sales activities you're engaging in. So if you're finding yourself even modestly interested in this stuff and you need some clarity, just go back and listen to the previous value shot segments in past episodes. Just think about these simple ideas for now. If you want to be a bit bolder, try applying them to something that you're already working on. See if you can check off the boxes. See if it makes sense to you. Just try not to overcomplicate it or read anything into it that isn't clearly there. If you have questions in the meantime, just contact me through any of the many channels that we have, and I will respond as quickly as possible in the most appropriate way. And at future episodes, we'll explore a lot of these ideas and many others in much more detail, and your questions or comments may help in determining what that should look like. I'll also have some handouts, or really just downloads, but you can still think of them as handouts in the analog sense if you like, and we'll have those ready in the next few weeks, and we'll let you know. In the meantime, as always, stay positive, stay focused on the destination, and keep all your options open on how you're going to get there. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on episode 5. And that's it for this episode of Guitar Business Radio. Thanks for being with us. You can stay tuned and stay in touch at guitarbusinessradio.com.